The Torment of Erysichthon, the man who ate himself. The wind blew gently through the sacred grove of Demeter, rustling the golden leaves of ancient trees that had stood longer than memory. Among them, one oak reigned supreme, an ancient behemoth with a trunk so thick that 3 men could not encircle it with their arms. White ribbons adorned its bark, fluttering like ghostly prayers in the breeze. The people of Thessaly had worshipped at its roots for centuries, leaving offerings to Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. But not Erysichthon. The king of Thessaly strode into the grove with a sneer curling his lips. A dozen of his men followed, their axes resting on their shoulders, though unease weighed heavy on them. They knew what this place was. They knew the stories. "My lord," one of his men said hesitantly, "this is holy ground." Erysichthon scoffed. "Holy? These are just trees." He marched forward, his boots crushing delicate flowers meant for Demeter's favor. "I will not let some goddess dictate what I can or cannot cut. That oak will make a fine banquet table." One of the villagers, a frail old woman wrapped in a threadbare shawl, stepped forward from the gathering crowd. Her eyes were wide with horror. "My king, you do not understand," she pleaded. "That tree is sacred. It is not merely wood, it is a home, a spirit of Demeter herself dwells within it." Erysichthon turned his gaze upon her, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "A spirit, you say?" He let out a cruel laugh. "Then let it weep as I take my axe to it." He took the axe from his belt, gripping the handle as though he could already taste his triumph. The first swing bit deep into the bark and an eerie groan filled the grove. Not the sound of wood breaking but something else, something alive. From the wound in the oak, dark red blood seeped, glistening in the dappled sunlight. A voice, mournful and full of pain, echoed through the grove. "You have struck the sacred. You have struck me. For this, Demeter shall strike you." Erysichthon hesitated for only a moment. Then, shaking off the chill that crawled up his spine, he lifted his axe again and brought it down. Again and again. The villagers gasped, some turning away, unwilling to witness the desecration. The tree gave one last, shuddering groan before it collapsed, the earth trembling beneath its weight. The moment it struck the ground, an unnatural stillness swept through the grove. The birds ceased their songs. The wind, which had danced through the leaves moments ago, was silent. Then the ground beneath Erysichthon's feet trembled, but it was not an earthquake. It was something else, something divine. In a flash of golden light she appeared. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, stood before him in her radiant majesty. Her eyes, bright as a summer sun and cold as the coming winter, fixed upon the king who had dared defile her sanctuary. Erysichthon's men dropped to their knees, heads bowed in terror. The villagers fell into silent prayer. But Erysichthon? He merely crossed his arms, lifting his chin. "Do you come to scold me, goddess?" he taunted. "I needed wood and I took it. No different from a farmer harvesting his grain." Demeter studied him with unreadable eyes. "You are a fool, Erysichthon," she said, her voice steady. "You believe yourself above the gods, but you will learn otherwise. Since you hunger for more than what is yours, I shall grant you a hunger that no feast can satisfy." She lifted her hand and whispered the name of an ancient force, Limos. From the shadows of the grove something stirred. A figure slithered forth, a wretched skeletal woman with sunken cheeks and empty eyes. Her ribs jutted out, her fingers were like talons, and her breath reeked of endless starvation. Limos, the spirit of insatiable hunger. Erysichthon for the first time felt something crack in his confidence. His mouth opened, but no words came. Limos reached out, her spindly fingers pressing against his chest. A chill, deep and relentless, sank into his bones. The curse took hold. At first he thought nothing of it. By the time he returned to his palace he felt a small hunger pang, nothing unusual after a long day's work. He summoned his servants. "Bring me food," he ordered. They brought platters of roasted lamb, fresh figs drizzled in honey, thick loaves of bread and spiced wine. He ate, and ate, and ate. But the hunger did not fade. "My lord," one of his attendants asked nervously, "shall I bring more?" Erysichthon slammed his goblet onto the table. "Do I look full to you?" he bellowed. The feast continued. What should have been enough for 100 men barely made a dent in his hunger. His stomach screamed for more. By the next day he had eaten through his kitchen's stores. The livestock were slaughtered. The grain silos emptied. His wealth, once vast, began to dwindle as he sent for food from neighboring cities. But it was not enough. It would never be enough. Desperation led him to his daughter Mestra. Mestra had been blessed, or cursed, by the god Poseidon. She had the power to change her form, taking on the shape of any creature she wished. Erysichthon, now gaunt and wild-eyed, saw her not as a daughter, but as a means to buy more food. "Daughter," he said, his voice strained with desperation, "you must help your father. I will sell you to a nobleman, and with the gold I receive, I will buy a feast worthy of a king." Tears welled in her eyes. "Father, no, please." But his hunger had consumed his love. She was sold. Yet as soon as she was out of sight she changed form. A bird, a fish, a horse, and returned home. Again Erysichthon sold her. Again she escaped. And yet it was never enough. His wealth vanished. His halls emptied. His servants fled. In the end there was nothing left. He staggered into the ruins of his banquet hall, his ribs pressing against his skin. His once powerful hands trembled. He had eaten everything. Everything but himself. The hunger whispered in his mind, "Eat." And so he did. His fingers became his first meal. Then his hands, his arms. He tore into his own flesh, a man devoured by the curse he had earned. And when at last there was nothing left, the world moved on. Demeter's fields flourished again. Her sacred grove healed. And Erysichthon, the man who had mocked the gods, became nothing more than a distant memory.